maybe I should have go around introduction so that you know who we are. Why don't you start there?
Sure, thank you. My name is Matt Hicks. I'm representative from Merrimack 24.
Good morning, all. My name is Rick Ladd. I chair House Education. I'm from Haverhill, New Hampshire.
Senator Prentice.
Good morning. I'm Senator Prentice, representing New Hampshire Senate District 5, hailing from lovely West Lebanon, New Hampshire.
And I'm Ruth Ward, and I represent Senate District 8. It goes from Dunbarton out to the river, the big river, Connecticut River. So, let's talk about the report. First, this is the first interim report that we're doing. Last year, because there was a resignation and a death, so the committee never really got to do very much of anything, so there was no interim report. This year, we do have one, and that's what we're going to discuss right now. We'll see if everybody agrees with the report. So I'm turning to my committee members and ask, you have read the report, I hope?
Yes.
And any concerns, questions, discussions?
When we pull up our notes.
And Representative Cordelia is not going to be with us today. She's away.
So, Senator Ward, if I may, a couple of things.
Certainly.
One is, to your opening statement about, maybe I missed it, that we were basically, we were not able to get the first report in.
Right.
Can the this being the first report in the first year because of an unexpected death and a resignation, should that, just in terms of either findings or preemptive statement, be put in here to memorialize that there's been, I don't know if it's a lag of a year, but I feel like it's worth saying, like, you know, we understand our duty and to be in compliance, and we're not last year, but that was out of our control. And I appreciate you stepping up and taking over. It may be worth, and I'm willing to craft a few sentences.
Just put in a paragraph to that effect. I think that will be
Okay.
fine.
That would be the first thing. The second thing is that, let's see, I wrote, I have us, and are we gonna talk, I guess some areas of concern, but are we gonna, in terms of looking at the charge of the Legislative Oversight Committee, are we gonna spell out some different recommendations? Are we gonna agree as a group on, because it asks us for recommendations. And I feel that some of them are like maybe buried, there's some not buried, but integrated into some of the different categories or questions that have, that, you know, you've done yeoman's work answering, but I'd like to tease out the ones that are there, or I have some of my own that I'd like to see go forward for future legislation.
Okay, do you want to take it from the beginning? And go
Yeah,
through it?
so I kind of sort of went, I usually read the last chapter of the book first, because I can't stand, I've got to know what's going to happen. So that being said, one of the things that I'm really concerned about is the language around our funds for public schools being diverted to the EFA program. And not just during one of our EFA, our Education Freedom Account Oversight Committee meetings, but in a public hearing last year about raising the threshold for eligibility from 300 to 350, was able to get on record following the money that, you know, the adequacy money that comes to a child and then does move either to a private school or a home school where now those are EFA students. And I understand the language around transition, like there were transition grants or transition program written in here to help that phase out, but it is public money and it is leaving public schools and it is going into this program, whether it's homeschool or private school, regardless of the amount of it, there is a pathway that clearly followed. I think it's important to state the transition, you know, how the transition language, or the transition, I call them grants, were set up to ease that on the public schools, but I do think that, in my opinion, it's not even just my opinion, the fact is that that money that's assigned to that child is public money and it is leaving the public school system. So maybe the word diverted is not the right way to describe this, but I have a concern about that and couldn't support it because I do, not only do I believe, but I know that that's what happens, and I worked that through with Commissioner Edelblue. He, I'm sure, you know, and there was a representative from the House, and we went through every stop this money makes before it goes outside of the public school system. So that's my opinion.
Okay,
And I believe I have facts to back it up. So I would like to address this differently. That's all.
what would you like to, how would you like to address it?
I think we can show, and I can write the paragraph that how the money moves from the adequacy funding for each child to a different setting. I mean, I think that this, unless I'm reading this wrong, does this not address that directly? It talks about the transitions grants, but it doesn't say, you know, that this money that would normally go to a public school is going to an EFA student, who are homeschoolers, or to a private school.
You see, I'm thinking it goes with the child. It does not go to the school. It goes with where the child is going to be educated. So I think at the end, our concern is really educating the child.
Right, but respectfully, but if it goes with the child, that's that money that's going with that child, and it's going to that school. It's not in it's not in their bank account. I mean, it is moving from, you know, by assignment, except for the homeschoolers. I know there's the EFA students, you know, they all have particular wallets that they use, but it is public money that is not going to public schools. It is going with the child to an alternative setting. So whatever that setting might be, by their choice when they're eligible. So I think that this, you know, this one paragraph, I don't agree with, respectfully.
Are you talking about the rest of the district public schools is paid 100% of adequate education grants for the first year? Is that?
Say that again.
You know, we were concerned that
Right.
if a child leaves their public school to go somewhere else, the school, depending on where the school is located in some poor neighborhood, that they will suffer because they don't get that tuition money. So the first year the child is gone, they get 100% of the tuition. The second year they get 50% of the tuition, and the third year they get 25% of the tuition, to give them 3 years to sort of accommodate themselves to changing circumstances.
The transition's correct. But the fundamental question is this public money that is going outside of the public school system? Or is this money that's going outside of the public school system that would normally go right there, even with the transitions that were built into this?
Okay, I see what you're thinking. I think public money goes to the public schools, doesn't go anywhere else, is that, okay?
Yeah.
What about the child's education? If the child is not doing well in the public school assigned to them, but need to go somewhere else?
That question, so that if they go somewhere else, they go somewhere else, but the question is, are funds moving away from the public education system?
It's moving with the child to get
Moving with the
educated.
child to get in for the reasons to meet their needs, and I've heard many stories from families and educators about how this can be beneficial for, you know, some children, but not all children, and we're still talking about a small population, although it's growing, but my fundamental argument, I'm not trying to undersell children here, is that it is money that would normally be in a public school, you're going to a public school, and it's not anymore. It's going to a private school, or it's going to an EFA student, and even religious education, but that aside, I think we have to be really clear, and I believe that I've been able on 2 occasions to take that exact amount of money and in the public setting go 1, 2, 3, 4, exactly where it heads, which is out the door and not into the school. So I think that this doesn't address it. If we're asking, the question is, are funds for public schools being diverted? Maybe diverted is not the word that we want to use, but is it leaving the public domain and going into alternative settings that are not public schools? And I know some public schools, so first of all, is it? Yes, with one caveat. The second caveat, and this is something that Kate Demers brought up and has come up a few times, which I kind of appreciate, is that sometimes this money does go to other public school districts because that's a better setting for them. So it's just not the home district, it's a different school district.
You also have public charter schools.
Correct. But those existed
which is
prior to
another-
this. Yeah, and so money could go there.
Okay.
I disagree would be, I fundamentally believe that I have time and time again, like walked this, you're probably tired of hearing me talk about it, walk this road, and I wanna walk this road in here. We can have the language about, I appreciate the transitions, I appreciate that it might go to other forms of public schools, but I think we have to be clear that there is public money that is not in public education now, more so than ever because of this program, and that we can track that one by one. That's my feeling.
Any other comments?
Just to follow up on that, thank you. I think the answer to the question is yes. I don't think it's no, but I think because if it is being gradually over a 3 or 4 year period, it being taken away from that school district, then it is leaving that school district. Whether it's following a child, that's a different question, because the question is fund for public schools being diverted, which I think the answer is yes.
Okay. Representative Ladd?
Well, I think we're just getting down and talking about the nature of the program, the rationale for the program existing. And we know that there are certain students which are not doing what they really could be doing in the public school setting, and they opt for this. The average cost of what? A student in this program would be what, a little over $5,200? And the average cost for a student to tuition to a public school is what, close to $20,000? So there's a huge difference here in what it's costing one program versus the public school system that you're talking about, Senator Prentice. So I think there, and we do see, you know, I was looking at an article which was put in the New Hampshire Bulletin yesterday, and it was an interview with Commissioner Edblue, and his statement that with 3 years of data under our belt, we know that students are coming and going from the program, which is true. Some have gone into EFAs and then come back into the traditional public school system, which is exactly how it was designed to allow various options for personal learning needs that may fluctuate from year to year based on whatever path is appropriate in the moment. And it's not about funding the system, it's about monies that are going to best support a child's educational need. And so, and what we're talking about here is not a large hunk of our students. We're talking over 4,000 students, yes, out of 160 something students, 60,000. And another point in this, of the EFA recipients, 6.3% are receiving additional state funding for special education purposes. That's much lower than it is for the students in the regular public system, which is, you know, over 20% of students receiving special education funding in the differentiated aid category. So I think we're missing the most valuable part of the discussion is what is the best for the child at that particular moment in their educational path. And to say that we're diverting money from the traditional public school, no, we're actually saving costs. When it, you know, and you've heard the discussion before, when you compare $5,000 to $20,000. So I guess Senator Ward, I kind of disagree that we should be going down this path. And I think what we need to be looking at is, we know there's four parts of that whole compulsory education stool: public school, private schools, homeschooling, and EFAs. We have tuitioning monies which we use for K through 8 students which don't have a 9 through 12 in their school, and they tuition out based upon what the local board may decide. It may be a private school. So these monies that are raised through taxes aren't sacred monies only for public schools. They're for the education of students. So philosophically, I don't agree with the conversation where we're going here.
Senator Clinton?
So thank you, and Representative Ladd, respectfully, this is not about, I don't want any words either put in my mouth or misinterpreted that I'm saying the education of children in New Hampshire is not important. I have a duty to look at this, if this is from an oversight perspective, of where the money goes and how it gets there. And yeah, maybe only $5,100 comes $5,100, is an adequacy aid. The rest is raised locally and spent locally, correct? Of that 20,000 that you were talking about? That's what the taxpayers, local taxpayers are.
The 5,200 is what I said as an average for the
Right.
EFA students.
So we have that, but then we have the remainder. So how is that raised? The public dollars, correct? From the locals, that is raised locally and spent locally, that impacts the property tax rate, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so I see those as almost two different horses, and this, trying to tie them together and saying we're actually saving money by shifting, basically shifting the underpinning or the foundation even further out. I think it could potentially start to cost more somewhere down the road, and we really don't know that yet. And I don't disagree with you on, the focus should really be on the best, what's the best way to educate New Hampshire children, but, we've gotten into a ground level discussion about how to fund education in New Hampshire that we've never really resolved. So we're just stepping around it and creating other pathways than dealing with the real issues. So this is just where I'm not against, I am for the best education of the child. I've never been in any different place. But if we're talking about money leaving the public school system, even if it's only, actually $5,200 is a lot of money to me. Personally, if that money is going someplace else, then it is leaving. And the remainder, depending on the school district of what it costs them, is locally raised and locally spent. And there may be ways for us to help with that rather than taking other dollars away. So, we can redirect this to discussion, because maybe I picked the wrong place to start, but I have certainly heard from constituents that they want to talk about this part of it, but they want us to spend more time talking about, how our who is teaching? Are they certified? How are we dealing with, say we have a 100% graduation rate, well, what does that actually mean? How do we know that we've hit those accountability points on the actual education side, rather than talking about the money, but it is part of the discussion. So, okay. I may have come, through the door the wrong way, but that's where I am on this, so. We agree in one particular place and we disagree in the other, and that's it. That's how it's gonna be, and that's okay. It's okay, and thank you.
Did you have another section you wanted to discuss? You said you had a couple of notes.
Diverted, disagree, eligibility. So there's, hang on a second. Anybody, oh my God, I think only one. Come on, I know that Representative Ladd and Representative Hicks have more to say. I follow the pathway of how the EFA money is handled. The administrative cost to the program. So I know, Representative Ladd, you've been interested in this previously. Do I remember we have not just the Children's Scholarship Foundation, but do we have a person at the DOE now who's doing this work as well?
Yes. Anybody from DOE here today? Yeah.
So, why? And should that be included in here as well, unless I missed it? that there's a Children's Scholarship Foundation, and there's a percentage that goes to them by contract for running this program, but we are incurring costs at the Department of Education for this.
Which section are you looking at?
That is, what is the page 2, what is the administrative cost of the program? And then I want to talk about eligibility, so.
Because these were the questions that came up.
Oh, I know, it's just how some of it's covered, I just thought we should add in there that there is, so we've got the Children's Scholarship Foundation, in terms of the administration, so what's the cost? So the cost is what goes to the Children's Scholarship Foundation, and then there is a cost at DOE, correct? We now have a position there. And maybe I'm missing something, but that's 1 year with the startup costs, the administrative cost 10% of each credit, so that's the Children's Scholarship Foundation getting things up and running. Yeah, and then it talks about the year 2, but the overall cost of administering, what is it annually? And then there's for the Children's Scholarship Foundation, and what is it for in the Department of Education?
When the last section of that was in year 2, the administrative cost was reduced to 7.97% of each grant, and the additional funds was awarded to the EFA programs. So you have, they started out with 10 because it was a brand new program and they needed software and stuff to set things up. So that has already gone down by a little bit over 2%. And hopefully, depending on what else is happening in our economy, they might even squeeze it down a little bit.
Which is good, there's a place in here where you comment about finding efficiencies, but there is an administrative cost that now exists within the Department of Education.
Do you have something to say? Could you answer that question?
My position was created by, through law, and my salary, I believe, is paid through an appropriation with the state. I don't believe my salary comes out at the 10% or the 7.97.
No, I don't think it does,
That's
I
part
think
of-
it is a
that's part of
separate
the law.
cost that is incurred by the appropriation to the program, and I think that should be reflected, so he answered it perfectly.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't know, your name?
Oh, my name is Brian Bolt with New Hampshire. I'm an
V-O-T-E or V-O-T-H?
No, VOELK, Bolt.
So I think this should reflect the cost over DOE. Like I say, it was created by law, we've added this, but that is part of administering the program. Okay,
I'll go down the list for you.
all right. Eligibility, and this, I think it becomes more, it's like who is eligible, and we know that we started 300, and then, we moved to 350. And it talks about, the work that's done, I believe it's at the Children's Scholarship Foundation, on the vigorous financial and household income evaluation for eligibility, but that is initial eligibility, and then it says, once admitted, the financial evaluation is not repeated, but residency is confirmed and agreements are re-signed annually. In addition to remain eligible, the record of educational attainment, test score, and portfolio evaluation must be submitted. So, and maybe this is more of a recommendation, but all other public programs where public dollars are flowing to individuals, and I know we've tried to address this before legislatively, has annual means testing. This is an open door, it says once you're in, regardless of how your income changes, you stay in. It could go down, it could go up. So I don't, at least it is clear, it says it just happens once. But I think one of the things we talked about in here, at this oversight committee, and I know we talked about, on the floor of our respective bodies, is that this is, it's a respectfully, and again, not the best education of the child, but this is the stewardship of the dollars. If a mom was on Medicaid, during her pregnancy, and her eligibility, she made more money, even if it's slightly more money, she risks having to leave that program and lose her benefits. And this is SNAP benefits, TANF, Medicaid are all tested regularly. This is the one place that there is like a dual track. So, I mean, I want it to be a recommendation that we ask these questions again. But who is eligible is accurately reflected. The question for me is, what's the future? And that's a recommendation of eligibility.
So you would prefer that each family is checked out every year for this thing? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you think of any other programs where that does not happen? For example, we talk about food in the school. Is that, do the parents have to fill out an application every year whether or not they're gonna, what their salary?
When they get free and reduced, they do. They do have to get checked out. And actually, my husband was a free and reduced child in Vermont, and he talked about, it's something that we've actually talked about at home. But yes, they do. And then in other, in other programs where public dollars are going into, say, healthcare or food or other supportive benefits, there is eligibility testing. They call it means testing, but I don't like that word, but that's basically what it is.
No, I agree with that. I think that there needs to be more accountability. And I think these are some of the questions, maybe not for this report, but moving forward, other questions about why, I'd like more data about why students are leaving the program. Be curious to know. Certainly when students leave schools, we'd like to know why they're leaving those schools. Maybe we can discuss that as yet. That's something I think moving forward. And I think just to go back, not to belabor the point, I think we were talking about two things before. My answer to the question, are funds leaving public schools, is just about money. It has nothing to do with why we have the program or whether we should have the program. It's just being accurate. Eventually, the funds do leave the public schools.
Representative Ladd? You know this thing inside out.
Well, no, I don't, but I don't mind with having accountability. I think that's needed. I would like to see accountability in a lot of our programs, and especially when it comes to reporting from the school districts on the annual DOE 25 form. I'd like to see that broken out so that audit is more reflective of the actual costs and it shows us where we're going with certain programs, including those areas of catastrophic aid. But in looking at this particular program, I want to weigh the part of this equation which we're not discussing. If the student is in there, as you say, with a parent that has taken some time off from work and is qualifying now for either TANF, SNAP, or Medicaid, then what happens that second year? The student is in a program. Do we have kids moving in and out like that, or is it wise for a student to be in there? Like when we develop an IEP for 3 years.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some kind of a time limit set, but to have a student in and out, that doesn't make for a really well-coordinated program of learning. And you must agree with that one.
So, yeah, man,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay. Representative Ladd, I do, and I think that I differ with some other folks in my opinion on this, but because we have going in and out, I don't think is to the best benefit of the child. And I think that we're in a position now, since this program is up and running, that if a child is in the program and has been in the program, I think it's a legislative solution. I think we have to build a plan that says if there is a change in eligibility, what is the landing pad in the course? It is not just, you come out and never go back. It is, is there a way to say, it's for the duration of middle school or the duration of high school? I don't know what the answer is, and it does take me away from some of my concerns about the public dollars, but in all sensitivity to the best course for that child, I think that if we've opened the door, this program is out there, if eligibility changes, we have to find a way to manage that doesn't hurt the child. And we really haven't talked about that, and I did bring it up at the June 5th Education Freedom Account Oversight Committee meeting, and I should have been asking it of you all, and it is, I think, a longer discussion. Instead, I asked the Commissioner of Education, who said, it's a legislative solution, that's not in my purview to discuss, because I'm not insensitive to that, I agree with you. So if we're gonna test for eligibility, we have to have a response to when that eligibility changes. I don't think you can do one without the other, but I don't pretend to know for a second what exactly that should look like.
There are a number of ways this is handled in other states, and we should look at that. For example, if your income increases marginally, then I have no problem with the child continuing, but if there is a jump that we're talking by tens of thousands of dollars, some states have a transition plan where the amount of money received from the EFA or Education Savings Account decreases with that when you start going up towards the 400-500% level, or where some states now have just gone away from that totally, and the eligibility is, and I'm really attracted to that concept where there's no eligibility amount that a child has to, jump the hurdle of 350%, 400%, what have you. That is changing throughout this country. And I think in the best interest of the student, it's wise that they stay in a program. But if we are interested in looking at other ways of doing this, there are other legislative processes that occur in other states. We can take a look at it.
We're gonna do, I think, man,
Yes.
I'd be more than interested to look in how, I think there has to be an eligibility threshold. I think if that changes, and I'd be happy to look at, what other states do where it is substantive, that there is a plan in place. They have to be balanced for a transition to another educational setting. I'm not interested in impacting children negatively, but once the door is open, now we have to face, you can't just do one without the other. And some of my colleagues may, disagree with me on that, but this is what I hear from, folks in my district who actually support being means tested. They're not concerned about that, but they just said, if something's gonna change for my child, what is that gonna look like? They see the accountability because they have it in other corners of their life as well.
But we have to remember that this is an interim report. We're
Right.
not-
Oh,
this is
so
not
I'm actually,
yet.
you know what, it's like a parking lot, like, I think that I have an interest in looking at these things, Representative Ladd, and doing it together, through this group, but if we're talking about the report, it becomes secondary, and I wanna make a recommendation that we, that we put eligibility, means testing for eligibility in there, and that we study, and then maybe the second part of that is that we study what the options are for transitions, like what would a change look like, and what would a transition be? And then we can argue that, or, was it opine, and then ultimately argue that legislatively. I do have another thing, but,
Well, can I respond to that?
Sure.
Or- I think it's a good idea. This is just an interim report. And we have other commissions and committees going on. One which I'm on is the teacher shortage. And we have looked at that for the last year plus. And we have come up with some, we came up with a transition plan when Senator Kahn left and Senator Ward took over that particular group. And what we're seeing is that we're also recognizing there's a shortage, and some of the shortage, there's a lot of rationale and reasons for that shortage. But one of them is pay. And we're looking at trying to attract these young teachers from college, university to come into the business of education and stay in our state. So we're looking possibly, you have a bill that you've retained over on your side, Senate Bill 217. We've retained Senate Bill 218 plus 632 HB. And we're trying to gel them, meld them together, where in patterning after what they're doing out in Idaho, where the first year, as the teacher says, this first year, the second year, the third year, the fourth year, then there's a grant amount which is awarded up to $12,000 back to that teacher, would help pay off some of that debt, which they all are saddled with. I think that's something that's come out of the second year of this study. that we're looking at. So I see that if we can lay down some of the issues which we want to address for this second portion here that I think Ruth's trying to get to, that this topic that you are just presenting right now, and I've just added a little bit to it, is worthy of putting down and saying this is an area that this commission or committee should pursue in the next months to come.
Agreed. I mean, I went back, just made sure, I looked at the charge under 194F to make sure that, like, what exactly are we doing here, and that there's a section for recommendations, so yes. I know this is interim, but I'd like to put that in there as a recommendation for the future. Maybe look at this in tandem between what I've talked about and what you brought forward. I think we have to refine that language, but that's fair. All right, Senator Moore.
Yes.
I know, sorry.
Did you want to?
She doesn't love it when so I do think it should be reflected in here. These are less questions, but areas that I think it should be reflected in here that we have asked the Department of Education. Well, the year-end report was due to us in August, and it didn't appear on the website in the last couple of weeks. And there are some differences between these reports, but I think it's important that when the year-end reports on this, and I believe August is when everything settles out, as I understood it, either from staff at DOE or the commissioner, that in a timely manner that is published. That we came into our last meeting, so we had a meeting in June, and we talked, said these things will square around in August, and we came into our meeting in, where are my minutes? I'm sorry. So we came into that next meeting in September, and we still didn't have a year-end report. I think recommendations, or it has to, just like my statement about we had to get ourselves repositioned because of some barriers that came up that were unforeseeable. We need, our partners in this, the Department of Education and the Children's Scholarship Fund, have to deliver reports that are requested on a timely basis, and this request for a year-end report going past that September meeting, I think that has to be addressed. We have to say, when we ask for it and it's due, it needs to come forward. Okay, so I'll stop there. I have one more. See, I'm already starting to move into some recommendations, but general things that have to do with the report itself, I wanted to reflect and I'm happy to help write these, our delay in getting things going, because I think that is fair, even though it was unforeseen. It's not our fault. It is unforeseeable, unfortunate circumstances. That when we ask for data that we need and we're told we're going to get it, that we get it in a timely manner from the departments and the entities that are responsible for that. And I think that is more part of the report than a recommendation for the future, because it's like, we could have had that in September and been contemplating some of this data a lot longer than in the last few weeks. And I wasn't even notified that it was that it was available. I had to go find it. We should have had that in our hands.
Well, do you want to have that as part of the report, that we need to have it? And it seems to me that will be a recommendation. And when the report is out, that we will get it ASAP.
If it's going to, is it ASAP or is it in August? Because as I understood, I believe it was either the commissioner or Caitlin, thank you, said that August was when, we were told in June that this would be ready in August.
Right.
And August came and went and we didn't have it. And we had a meeting without that data, which I think is important, especially coming up on our first report. So I want to put a time on this. Say, we have a report that's due by November 30th, then same goes.
If that report is ready, but we have been waiting for reports from other agencies, and they have been delayed for whatever reason, so.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So I don't know whether that should be part of a recommendation or just making a note that there might have been changes, but we don't have them because we have not received the reports. And the reports will be available on the website, so anybody can go and look at them and find them.
It's a functioning responsibility to have that available to us in our deliberations. And the sooner the better, and if we're told it's August, then it's August. And I, look, you know, I mean, I have another job, and in that job, if I'm gonna miss a deadline, because there are circumstances, I communicate that with my leadership and say, I know we talked about doing it at this particular meeting, I'm gonna need 2 more weeks because the CPA firm is not gonna have X ready until then. And so that's on the record, everybody goes, okay. So maybe it's a recommendation, but I do think it needs to be cited in here.
Can I just want to
Yes.
that? Over the years that I've been in this house, the 16 years, this is a problem that's occurred every year, and it's being magnified now. We're looking at the number of pieces of legislative service requests in as of this moment, and there's well over 800 LSRs. Senate, you all are looking for another 300 coming in. And a number of these that we had in the last session, and of course my committee had over 100 of them, and we waited for financial notes, fiscal notes. And some were being developed by the department, some were developed by safety, et cetera, all the different bureaus and departments. We had to pass some bills out without even having a fiscal note. And Division 2 is fortunate to get some of those notes. However, with the overload that we're doing to ourselves, with so many pieces of legislation, then I look at people like Caitlin Davis over there and Mark over there at DOE who are trying to handle these requests. It's tough. It is very tough. And I'm not trying to provide excuses. I can tell you that when we were looking at the teacher shortage committee, and we were working with Mr. Appleby out of the certification department over there, and we requested information. You know what kind of return we got from the superintendents in the field on that survey he put out? Initially, 20% responded. 6 months later, we got the high of 59%. Now, the department's having to chase these things down, and it's not just with the department, it's emanating down lower than that, where we're getting this information. Now, that's just one example. We had the same thing when we had the Public School Infrastructure Commission, where we're looking to find out how many people got their emergency management operation plans in if they want these grants. Again, it was 20%. The only hammer we had was to say, you're not going to get a grant until your report's in. It's funny, 2 weeks later, all the reports were in. So I'm not trying to offer excuses, but there is an overload over there. And the legislature is one that could appropriate money, more staff members for it. We tried to get an analyst over there, and that didn't make it in the budget to work with Dr. Green. So I concur. I'd like to see things come in when the date in law says they should be in. But being a realist, it's not going to happen.
Okay, so we're back to the interim report. What would you like to do with it? Do you want to add some of your suggestions or requests under a section called recommendations? Because we have to remember that we have, well, as far as I know, this is going to go on for quite a while. So we have meetings that we can schedule to answer, so get hold of some of that information. And they'll be part of next year's interim report.
So, would you help me with this, Senator Ward? Would you say it's going to go on for quite a while? You mean the program or the writing of the report? Okay.
I mean, the Oversight Committee, as far as I know, I haven't got a drop dead date.
Yeah, it's written into law without an expiration,
Like,
194F, and it's, you know, like, it was, I think it needs to stay there because there are important questions that so I'm gonna circle around and then I'm gonna get back to the exact things and I'll offer to help with crafting some of the language to see if we can get ourselves to a place, because as written now, I couldn't, and I know you did a lot of work on this, but I can't support it as written now. I wanna add some things and propose some subtractions and see if we can come to a middle ground, and I wanna make a series of recommendations. But I think that it's really important to us to have the data. I hear what Representative Ladd is saying, and I know, like, when you expect it, you gotta get it. And if I wasn't told in June I'd have it in August, you know, and then, so now what's happening is, it's finally out, and we have important questions that we need to talk about here, like the changes in numbers of people coming in and out of the program, like, I wanna understand that better, what's behind it, but because it's come so late up against this, it seems like that's gonna get set aside, not addressed in here, as maybe it should be, and it really needs more time. So I'm getting questions about that, and I'm like, I don't know, that's what this group is for, but, you know, we had, you know, those numbers just came out. All right, so I have, you know, some recommendation, I have some changes that I wanna make around why, you know, the additional year before we filed this. I wanna write some different language on the administrative costs to include the Department of Education's position that was you know, has an appropriation and has a hire to go along with the Children's Scholarship Foundation. I'd like to take a pass at rewriting or leaving what you have, but changing, adding additional language to it, and maybe we wanna not use the word diverted, I'm not exactly sure what it should be, but put that in here, put additional language in here about, you know, following the breadcrumbs with, as they move with each student in that setting. I actually, although we haven't talked about this, is can students receive EFA money and scholarship money, and you're right, the Education Tax Credit Scholarship Program, it's not within the purview of the commission. We could say that, but we could also say, we could answer the question, say, this, although this is not in the purview of the commission, here's the answer to that. That's just a suggestion. Even though I think it's interesting, but I'm not sure we'll have enough time to get there. The concentration of, so those are the changes that I want to make, and I'm happy to, you know, put it to pen to paper. But things that then there are the recommendations moving forward. It seems like the eligibility piece, you know, verifying annually eligibility, and exploring options for transitions for discussion would be one. Establishing again the reporting, you know, like the reporting deadline annually. If it's August is when the book's settled, and August or even September 1st is when we get the report. I want to further explore defining what 100% graduation really looks like. And then the last thing is has to do with conflicts of interest. So in going back through my notes on this, there are, so if there is, I'm not interested in members of any public body. I mean, obviously, but there may be legislators who have children who are in the EFA program. That's not where I'm going. But if they run a business that benefits from EFA dollars are coming into the business, like they run a cooperative or a learning pod, and they're bringing EFA money comes in, and they sit in the body that makes the decisions around this. Is that annually reported anywhere?
Well, I think we have a list from the scholarship fund of all the venues that they use, and there's quite a few of them.
Right. So we've got that, but if you're, like, a perfect example, so I used to do work for interstate compacts, and I work for an association management firm that still does interstate compact work. So I have a conflict of interest form on file here that I don't participate in those discussions or those votes because I have a proprietary, even though not all of them go through my firm, some of them do, and I have a proprietary, my Christmas bonus might have some of that money in it, so I have cleared my deck of that intentionally and so here, what I want to know is, are there, if we have members of either body that are making decisions about raising thresholds for eligibility and are receiving dollars into a business that they run, is that reported? And if I have to report that and I made the decision I was gonna report it, that I, have a stake in associate, work around interstate compacts, certain ones, but I try to blanket it, then, that's on file. Do we know if we have members of this body, and should that be part of this in terms of transparency?
When you say this body with the legislators are the ones that will make these decisions. And we are the ones that write down the rules. If you're talking about, does Mrs. Jones, who has a small bookstore that sells unusual picture books, if she gets some EFA, somebody comes there and buys a book, is that reported, does she have a conflict of interest? I don't know, because there are so many of them. I think one of the thing came up, somebody was working for one of the companies, and they were questioning whether or not she should actually have anything to say about the scholarship funds. And it seems to me that, what is the level of conflict also? I mean, if you're working for a firm if you're working for Amazon, which is one of the biggest firms that the EFA money goes to, should you then have a conflict of interest in not being able to participate? I don't know.
Well, as long as you put it on file, so there's two ways that conflicts get dealt with. You can put it on file that you have that and you're still gonna participate and vote, or you put it on file that you have that and you're not gonna participate and vote. So does anybody, are there members of the House or the Senate that have a business, and this is not just now, I'm talking about into the future, in terms of transparency, are we transparent on this? Do we know, are people who are benefiting from this financially reporting? And I don't know, but the question's been asked and it came up in a prior meeting. So that's why I'm putting it out there. Should this be a recommendation that those conflicts are annually reported? I actually think it helps with transparency and gives, if they are, running one of these schools, it just puts them on record, like, I'm completely transparent about what I get and how I get it. And, you have to decide yourself where, or with the advice of legal counsel, where your conflict. It's about pecuniary, where your conflict is, and do you financially benefit?
But you're talking about legislators.
I'm talking about legislators.
And we have to fill out that form, remember, every year.
Right. But do we have a report of who is receiving EFA dollars into not their children, but into a business that they have, like they're running a learning cooperative that gets EFA dollars, so they are benefiting from that financially. Are they putting this on conflicts of interest forms, and/or are they voting on these bills?
I think we can.
What?
Leads.
I think we ought to have a representative speak to that.
All right, sorry. Right, so we were just trying to clarify.
Yes.
Thank you, yes, so I think you are talking about potentially me. Although I don't own a business, I do work for a school that could receive EFAs, although we do not. We did not sign up to be one of those schools, although there's reimbursement that people can put in. We don't have any knowledge of that. We can look in the record to see that somebody has put in. So what do you do with that, right? And so I think it's a fair question. I also think it's a fair question to consider if there is a vote to raise the eligibility limit, right? If there are legislators who might become eligible at that point, then do they get to vote on that? If they could benefit from that by now participating. There's all sorts of questions that could come up. I agree. I think it improves transparency to address this. I'm not sure that that's what the point of this meeting is, but for future, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Open to it.
What are recommendations?
And I brought it up because we have talked about it at past meetings. So I'm interested in exploring it, whether it is a recommendation out of here or for the future. And I want to just be on the record that this is about businesses, like, and I know, you have your own, you have a school that you run, not about if a family is receiving those dollars for one of their children that they are sending to either they're an EFA student or they're sending to a private school. That's different than having a business that receives those dollars that, basically puts dinner on the table. That's all.
Okay,
I'm getting tired.
so
Everybody's probably thankful of that, right?
So where do we stand with this thing? You wanna,
if you're happy with me doing some wordsmithing and additions, I'll
okay,
do
why
it.
don't you write out what, under each paragraph here that we have, what it is that you want to change, add, delete, or whatever. And we'll take it up, and then we obviously have to have a section that says recommendations.
Yeah.
And just keep in mind that I think we've done pretty well this first year that we have been organized and having had meetings. We have a lot more time in the future that we can meet and go through some of these questions as they arise. And there may be other questions that we have not even anticipated yet that will pop up. So if you will do that, because you have most of the concerns, then you write that up. And did you have something particular, or did you just pretty much agree with Senator Prentice?
Well, any concerns that I have, I think Senator Prentice covered them at length,
Okay.
so.
I'm sorry. And Senator Ward, I want to thank you. You picked up this committee, this, this group when, we were in that transition because of, again, a resignation and an untimely death, and have really done a great job over the last year, like herding this, getting us all together, getting the departments at the department at the table, the scholarship foundation, the different stakeholders. So none of my input is trying to criticize any of the, really hard work you've done over the last year.
Thank you.
Right. That's how it is.
Do you have some last minute?
Well, that last conversation was kind of all over the board a little bit. In working with the Secretary of State's office, we do have to document all our conflict of interest, whether I'm a member of the teacher retirement system of this state or even a member of the teacher retirement system in another state.
Yeah.
That's documented. So I'm not sure exactly where you're going with all this, but I think that the way to really assist legislators then is in the defining of where that conflict of interest really starts and stops. And that may be done during the orientation meetings, which we have for new legislators coming in and for those that have been around. But surely there's a number of us, including the representative right here, that's very involved with a school. And others that are in the chamber as well, or in the House and the Senate. So I think the best way to handle this is through, working with the Secretary of State, when all that information goes out to it, to try to explain what is a conflict of interest. So people, and then if they step off the deep edge, that's on them. It's not on us to have to deal with. It's already, much of this is already in law.
Okay. I guess we're not gonna sign off on the report today, but we're gonna meet again because the report is not due until November 30th.
May I ask a question about the difference between signing off on the report and a minority report? Because I'm not sure how that works.
No, it's just the signatures of the people on the committee. It's not the minority or majority report.
Okay,
The five of us sign off that, we agree with the report. That's why it's important that we have it. And if you don't sign, then you have an option on not signing it at all.
okay, thank you.
Or in the case when I was on the commission for looking at funding of education, I wrote a minority report. And I explained why I was writing that minority report. I think there's always room, because that might be something we learn from as well, as far as going forward. I think it would be important that if somebody disagrees enough where they can't support, this is just going to be a transition type report where we're going, and I'm supportive of that. But if somebody at the end wanted to write, we came out with certain recommendations, there's something there which really, was bothersome, certainly you write a minority report.
So thank you for sharing that, Representative Ladd. So let's provide some edits and feedback. I will do this with Senator Ward as quickly as I can, and we can discuss that. And if we can, my goal would be to come up with something that we maybe don't agree with, like that there's going to be agreement and disagreement within it, but it is, that happens all the time. in the public work that we do. And if we can't come to a place where we can make, statements in here that, reflect opposing viewpoints but are about the program itself, then a minority report is the other option. So I'd like to try to get us to one place where we can that there's agreement and disagreement, and we're clear about that on the record. And if it doesn't, then what Representative Ladd has just, shared his experience is the other option.
So, if there's nothing else that we need to discuss today, then I would just call for an adjournment.
I mean, I'd love to adjourn, but there's a lot of questions, I don't know if it's for today. There's a lot of questions about this most recent report that came out and showing changes in students coming into the program and leaving the program, and they're not all due to graduation. So I don't know if this is something we want to explore now. I'm not looking to kick the can down the road, but that's why, like, getting the report so late in the game, it was like, how come these numbers are changing and why? I don't understand enough about that.
But do you have the report? I don't have that report. So I can't discuss it.
Well, the report, it's on the Department of Education's website, it's that graph, looks like that worksheet that they do, that's compared to the worksheet from last year. It's just, I didn't know that it was there until maybe 2 weeks ago. And I had been looking for it, there was a different report there that was new to me, but it was done by parts of the state. Let me bring this up. So there is a report on the front page of DOE's website that lays out. Hold on, let me pull it up.
And perhaps we can take a look at that report, all of us, and have it ready.
Can I cut in here for a second, please? Because I'll just read a part that I have in this news release that came out yesterday. It said, among the 4,200 or 4,211 students receiving EFAs, 1,577 are new to the program this school year, and 2,634 are returning. Since the last school year, 109 students have graduated, 75 have enrolled in public schools, and 524 have made other exits, a category not defined by the department. That's what we want to find out.
Yep.
And so I would just take this statement right out of this article right here and say, hey, the next meeting, we'd like to have a report from them as to what's going on.
It's on the front page under 2324.
Yeah.
EFA fact sheet is where I believe was a source for that article.
Mhm.
That's what, yeah. Yes, Representative Ladd, thank you.
I'll give that to you, Ruth, so it's right,
I have to,
right here.
So we'll get that for our next meeting.
okay.
We'll look at it and see what we can do with it.
I like we have both these education meetings on the same day. This was great.
Anything else? Can I have a
So moved.
motion? Sorry, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming.